Welcome to the last episode of the Fall 2020 Are You Ready to Garden program. Tonight, we'll be talking about caring for houseplants with Master Gardener Kate Colucci. If you're interested in hearing about upcoming Are You Ready to Garden webinars, please email mastergardeners at co.middlesex.nj.us, or you can give us a call at 732-398-5220, which is our Master Gardener helpline. So also, if you have any gardening questions, you can call or email us with your questions. Bill, did you want to chime in?
I wanted to just thank everyone that's joined us this past year for the Are You Ready to Garden series. It's been a pleasure to be able to provide information to you throughout this period of everybody kind of isolating and continuing to provide gardening information. I just want to remind everyone that their county Master Gardener programs try to restart as soon as we possibly can. So this is kind of a preamble to many of the trainings we have throughout the state. But please seek out and search your local county Master Gardener program for the future, because we're going to get started up again as soon as we can to offer hands-on training. I want to get started here, and I want to thank Kate Colucci for adding her valuable time tonight to this program, and thank everyone that's involved in this. And I hope you enjoyed tonight's presentation. Kate, I'm turn it over to you.
But before starting, I just wanted to say that I hope all of you are faring okay during this awful pandemic, and I hope that perhaps this little garden talk will help you to get some plants going to bring you some health and peace over the winter time. I want to challenge you to challenge yourself by starting a new type of plant or learning a new skill with houseplants. So that's just to get us started. So just a little bit about myself. My name is Kate Colucci, and I've been a Master Gardener, was trained through the Middlesex County program, and I really love all aspects of gardening, probably everything a little bit too much. Sometimes I have a hard time focusing because I love outside gardening, inside gardening, vegetables and flowers. But I do have a really special interest in houseplants, and I think perhaps it's because I like to decorate my inside environment, and I'm also an occupational therapist, so I use especially houseplants to do some horticulture therapy. So that's part of my interest. I volunteer at the Veterans Home with others to do some horticulture therapy as well. So I am a houseplant person who is learning, just like everyone. I'm not an expert, but I'm trying to now learn a little bit more about specific types of specific plant families and genuses. So I've taken an interest lately in some of the gesneriads, the begonias, hoyas. Those are some of my interests. I'm also trying to do a better job with overwintering some of the plants, and I'll talk a little bit about that. I love mini gardens and terrariums, and I also enjoy starting bulbs and seeds. So I guess I'm trying to do everything again, as I mentioned. So what is the aim of this talk tonight? Well, a couple of things. I want to talk about the basics, and I'm sure for many of you this is going to be repetition, but I know myself when I listen to a talk, it always helps validate some basic principles, even if I'm familiar with them. So we'll go over the basics about houseplant care, and then we're going to start off and talk a little bit about the history of houseplants and why now it seems that they're all the craze. So that's kind of what I plan to do. So I think most of you know that houseplants are good news, gardening is good news, and we know from research that houseplants are good for your physical health, your mental health and well-being, for your soul. And since ancient times, the Romans, the Babylonians enjoyed putting foliage plants in earthenware pots. So this has been going on forever. But one of the biggest shifts in our history, it was in Victorian England, where during the 1800s there was an obsession with growing plants indoors, and it was kind of a hobby for wealthier people. With the advent of indoor heating, as well as the Wardian case, which was essentially the first type of terrarium. And so that really got people going with gardening. And if you look at this next slide, I loved visiting this Eastman Museum and Mansion in Rochester, New York. It was the Kodak, Richard, I think, Eastman. And so this was like early 1900s, but I think the slide kind of gives a bit of a Victorian flavor where we see a lot of palms and ferns. And this is the sunroom where apparently Mr. Eastman ate most of his meals. And when I was in there, I just got such a peaceful, healthy feeling of really bringing the outdoors in. And I show this because it kind of reminds me of the Victorian era. So next, I wanted to talk a little bit about the 1970s and 1980s, when we kind of learned that bringing plants inside, especially into office buildings, would be really good for our health. So what was happening is we had the energy crisis, and buildings were becoming sealed tight. They were putting in a lot of insulation to save heating costs, and there was no indoor-outdoor air exchange, and people were getting sick. People were getting allergies and headaches, and this was called sick office syndrome. So the Associated Landscape Contractors of America, supported by NASA and headed by Dr. B.C. Wolverton, started to look into, could plants help to pull some of these volatile organic chemicals out of these sick office buildings. And we knew that the plants would be providing oxygen. But so this was a study that was done, and in fact was successful. And the recommendation was that having a plant about every 100 feet or so would be helpful to pull some of the chemicals that were from the insulation, from the office furniture, and promote a healthier environment. So the link is here. It's much more detailed than what I've presented, but you can also read more in some of the books by Dr. Wolverton. He is a botanist, a scientist, and he is still living, and he has some very interesting publications and does recommend some specific plants. NASA was involved because, of course, they were looking to make the space station, the sealed space station, healthier. And they all really just concluded something that we know, that if we are here on planet Earth with trees and plants, we need to bring them inside. We can't live without them. And so man's existence on Earth depends upon this life support system. And so the answers are obvious. If man is to move into closed environments on Earth or in space, he must take along nature's life support system. So if you're interested, I encourage you to read the write-up of the little study or find some things by Dr. Wolverton. I want to mention that tonight I am going to mention different books. I have some podcasts that I like, but I don't know any of these people. They're my recommendation. I don't have any gain by doing this. They're just things that I enjoy that I'm passing on to you. So another interesting point in the history of houseplants was during the 1970s and 1960s when people started to really decorate their homes more with plants. And this Dr. D.G. Hessian came on the scene in the UK. He started to develop simple books for the indoor gardener that helped people choose and decide where to put the plants. And he still has some publications today about all aspects of gardening, but especially indoor gardening. I have some of the books right here next to me, but I realize you wouldn't be able to see them well. They're in the reference list. During the 70s, there was also a lot of coverage in women's magazines, and plants became an important part of home design, and there were more plant types that became available. Okay, but we found that at the end of the 1900s, it seemed that houseplants were falling out of favor a little bit, except for, quote, older people. But I know I'm skipping maybe 20 years. In the past 10 to 15 years, there's a huge resurgence and a big interest in houseplants. And a lot of people feel that this is in part due to the people we refer to as the millennial generation. They have fallen in love with houseplants, according to Better Homes and Gardens and a lot of other sources. And for people who are master gardeners, and for all of us, it's kind of interesting to wonder a little bit about why. And some people have conjectured that it's because of social media, that we can share all of this through social media. People see how nice others' homes look with their houseplants. Others feel it's about connecting back to nature, that millennials really like this connection to nature and their health and well-being. But for whatever reason, houseplants are much more widely available. You can get a much bigger variety, and they're being shared like crazy over social media. I'm not going to click on this link, but these are here for you because they're kind of interesting that millennials are even hiring consultants to style their houseplants or to raise their plant babies. People are very particular in taking really good care of their plants. In 2019, Better Homes and Gardens wrote an article about 5 houseplant trends that would be hot in 2020. And these include things like the big, colorful foliage houseplants, like the calatheas. Also, plants like the monstera, the Swiss cheese plant. They also predicted, and I believe it was going on in 2019 and 2018, succulents, people getting together to have succulent parties and to do crafts with the succulents, and again, the social media and the hobby and the sharing of plants. So that's just a little bit about the history. I think it's kind of interesting. So now, let's get into some of the meat of our discussion about houseplants for tonight. So just like when we talk about outside plants in gardening, the same principle applies, the right plant in the right space. And I can personally tell you, as someone, I definitely consider myself a beginner for houseplants, but I've improved so much. I used to get a plant, I really didn't even know really what it was, and I just figured I'd put it in the window and I'd water it. And I wondered, why it died or didn't do well. And now I really take the time to consider all of these things. Each plant that we get, we bring into our home, needs a certain combination of these factors. We really need to think about the fact that the plant is in a pot. It doesn't have the worms and the interchange with the microbes and in the outside environment. It doesn't have the natural lighting. We have to think about where the plant came from. Did it come from the jungle in the tropics? Is it a flowering plant that needs the sun? So we have to think about where they live naturally, And I try when I get a new plant or before to really read about it. There's a lot of opportunity for that. Learn its name and try to think about that. But we know that all plants, even if they're low light plants, they must have light. That's their food for energy and growth. They need water, but that is something we have to be really careful about, and we'll talk about that. Varying needs for humidity and ventilation, and we'll talk about humidity. Temperature parameters. Plants need certain temperatures in the daytime and then cooler at night. Especially flowering plants need cooler at night. Varying potting medium, and then fertilization is something else that we need to consider. So we have to be careful to choose the right place with these factors in mind. So first things first, most people will tell you that the number one killer of houseplants is overwatering. And it's kind of counterintuitive. I know as a beginner, I just, thought every couple of days, let me just water this plant. Well, no, because plants need water, but they also need oxygen at their roots, and their roots will rot and drown. And so much of the watering depends on the climate and where the plant is, and also, so we'll talk a little more about that. But it needs to be thorough, but more or less infrequent, and many plants like to dry out between, either partly or completely. So really, we should not have a schedule for watering our houseplants. We should water them when they need to be watered. And we need to talk about how we know, and we'll do that in a second. But the other thing is the method of watering the plant. We should water the plant until the water comes through and drains out the drainage, which you must have drainage holes for your plant, and then dry out. Because some of the act of the water going through is actually going to help to drive oxygen to the roots and to create some spaces. So let's figure out how we're going to know when to water our plants. Well, probably the simplest thing to do is the finger check method. If you can, and especially with a smaller house plant, you want to stick your finger in and feel near the root area to see if it's dry or moist. Another thing you can do is to lift the pot. Know what it feels like when it's heavy or full of, too much water or light. And of course, that's going to be dependent on what you're trying to accomplish. We also, something that will help us with our watering practices is we have to ensure that the soil has some air spaces, so you can dibble the soil from time to time so that you're creating, you're not letting it get really compact. Because if the soil is too dry, the water is going to pass right through, which is a good thing for some plants, but not for others. We can also water the plants from the bottom. Some plants like being watered from the bottom, not to sit in the water. We never want to let a plant just sit in water any more than a half an hour, but we can give it some water on the bottom and let it absorb up and then spill out the rest after a half hour, 45 minutes. There's also wicking methods where we can take like a water wicking, like a shoelace, that type of material, or you can buy wicking material. And by the capillary principle, the water, we would put the shoelace, the material in a bucket of water and then attach the other end into the plant, and the water will wick into it. I have an article for you about that that I'll refer to. I myself have not yet done this, but it's very popular, and you can find out a lot about that on various sources online. Okay, so we're going to be wary about water. We can go a little bit by information about the plant to know whether the plant needs ample water, it likes a moisture environment, moderate, or low. And if your plant doesn't like a lot of water, we would let the top dry out to at least a couple of inches versus more water, ample, once it gets dry below like a half an inch, we want to water it. So ideally, you'll insert your finger into the stem and area of the root zone if you can. I have one here, something that you can purchase. It doesn't matter where it came from, but it's a meter that you can insert if it's a bigger plant, and it will give you a readout on if it's very dry or, very moist. But just because a plant is a little bit dry isn't necessarily a bad thing. We have to know what the plant wants and needs. Water needs increase during active growth, which for most plants is not now. It's going to be in the spring and summer, starting like March. And when plants are flowering, they're going to need more when the temperature increases. Plants that are too dry obviously will wilt and turn gray-green. When they're too wet, dropping leaves, turning yellow, and, the roots are going to rot. So we can save rain or use mineral-free water. We can also use tap water. I like to fill my little watering pot up and let it sit a couple of days to let the minerals settle out before I water it and let it get to like room temperature. Just like outside gardening, it's good to water in the morning. Use a narrower spout so you're watering the soil medium, not the foliage. And again, we mentioned not letting it sit in water. So humidity is another factor and something I've been trying to tune into myself a little bit more. So with more humidity, the whole process of plant transpiration slows down, which is good for many plants, that the water can get more thoroughly to the roots, the leaves, before it gives off into the environment. And once we turn on our heats, which I think everyone has turned on their heat yesterday and today, we get this dry air, and this speeds up this process. We lose the humidity. So plants really cry out during this weather. So how can we increase humidity? Well, one of the easiest things to do is to group plants together. Downstairs I have, in the north part of my house, ferns like close together. They like to breathe together and be together. We can bring a plant into the bathroom for a while, or have a low-light plant in the bathroom, put it, in the shower, let it gather, get some humidity. We can use a humidifier. Some people do that. They use a humidifier in the area of the plants. You can put a plastic bag. It's like the terrarium effect. Also, a terrarium or a closed terrarium is really going to increase the humidity. Obviously, you wouldn't put a succulent in a humid environment like that; it would rot. But like for ferns and other foliage plants like that, that would be great. Also, turning your heat down is going to increase the humidity. So potting medium is an important principle or important thing to consider with your houseplants. The purpose of the medium really is to hold the plant and the roots in place, and to provide some food when you first pot up the plant. The potting mix is going to have some organic material and some fertilizer in it. But we have to know that the plants don't have the worms and other things that happen outside. And so for many plants, we need to add to a potted mix, either vermiculite or perlite, to create an airier type mix, so that the medium can absorb and retain the water. Now, if you're planting succulents, cacti, we want to have a sandier mix that doesn't retain water, that washes through. But going back to watering, even with a succulent plant, you can water it through and then let it dry out. If we make the planting medium denser by adding organic material, more organic material like in an African violet mix, it's going to hold the water more. So we have to look at the medium, and when it gets really compact, the plant needs to be repotted because it's going to be holding too much moisture or just so dried out that nothing is going to get through. This isn't the best time of year to repot, typically in the spring, but, if it needs it, you can certainly do that. Okay, hold on a second here. Very, very important is we have to allow drainage. Any plant, except for like in a terrarium, it needs to have drainage holes. It's not okay just to put rocks in the bottom and have a closed container, although some places will recommend that. No, it's not enough drainage, and the roots can still rot in that situation. So if you want to use a pretty decorative outer pot that doesn't have holes, use that as your cache pot and put the plant with the drainage holes inside that. And you can put stones at the bottom of that cache pot and even a little bit of water to keep it a little more humid, not so that the plant is sitting in it, but just to create a little bit more of a humid environment. So we've got to have drainage holes. Another thing that our plants do need is fertilizer from time to time, but the rule is definitely for inside plants, less is more, and not this time of year. We would fertilize primarily during growing season, so not now through March, because many of our houseplants are resting or dormant through the winter months. And you want to obviously look at the bag and understand what you're trying to do. If it's a plant that's going to be flowering, look at the phosphorus content, versus the nitrogen, the vegetative, and the foliage growth. Again, I'm not an expert at all in this area, but I would read about the particular plant and understand the fertilizing needs and the time of year to fertilize. But be cautious, again, less is more with fertilizing. Believe it or not, it's very important to think about the type of pot or container that we're putting our houseplant in. So the good old clay terracotta pot, I really like those. They're very traditional looking, but we've got to know that that's going to pull the water away from the plant. And so it would not be a good pot to put a moisture-loving plant in. It would be great for succulents. You can use it, but you have to be aware that it's pulling the water out. A good rule of thumb is before putting a plant into a terracotta, you can soak that pot in water for a couple of hours so it is moist. And right away when you plant the plant, it's not pulling all the moisture away. We can use plastic, ceramic, or metal, which are impervious to water. We want to be careful about the color. If you're putting something in a south window, you wouldn't want to use like black or dark blue pot because that would really pull in so much heat. White is probably better in that situation. The idea of a cache pot or an outside pot for the look that it creates or to provide more humidity or even to further protect the plant from temperatures, protecting the roots. We don't want to go too big. We want to maybe have the pot an inch or two bigger. If it's too big, the plant won't get the water and the nutrients that it needs. When we up pot, if the root ball is getting bigger and you want the plant to grow bigger, you would go one size up. Or you would try to trim the root ball to keep it the same size and repot it. All right, so now on to a really important point, and honestly something that I'm really trying to learn about is lighting for houseplants. So we can first talk about natural light, but for natural and artificial light, we talk about intensity, duration, and distance. So intensity is really in part based on the location. And this is where you need to know your environment, your house or your office or wherever, and figure out, where the intense light is coming. Where is your south window, if you have them? And that's going to be where the highest, most intense light all day long. Frankly, some plants can't tolerate that type of intense light without some filter, like a Venetian blind or a thin curtain, especially in the summer. Now, this time of year, I have plants right in my south window that are sun-loving, and they're very happy there. But I have to be careful it doesn't get too cold at night. The east and west are going to be the second most intense. The east is going to have cooler light. It gets really warm in some west windows in the afternoon, but it's like a half a day of intense sun. On the north, exposure is going to be your lowest light, the shady, ambient, type of light, and that's good for some plants that we'll talk about. A lot of plants are recommended to have indirect light. They want bright light, but not indirect sun. So there's ways to modify, thinking about the dappling of light with like a Venetian blind or curtains, or what an outside building or tree does to your exposure. The impact of a white wall that's reflecting back, or a mirror, and clean your windows. That does make a big difference, as much as cleaning the foliage so that the photosynthesis can occur in the best way possible without the dust. So we also should rotate the plant, and the exposure that plants get to light obviously changes with the season, the shorter days. We can tell if a plant is getting too little light when we have pale new growth and we see the plant really stretching towards the sun, losing its shape, or, the roots rotting. So this is interesting to realize the distance from the light source, how rapidly it decreases, and it's by the inverse square law. So if you have a plant right up against the window, it's getting, say, a certain amount of light. You move it just 2 feet away, it's only getting 25% of what it got. So you figure it out by 2 feet, you square 2, that's 4, a quarter, or 25%. If you move it 3 feet away, 3 squared is 9, so it's really just getting about 10% of the light that it got, which may be fine, but it's just important to know that it really does change. The light is less intense when it's up higher. So we also need to understand about our plant. Is it a plant that needs long days of light, like our annuals, or short to go into bloom, like poinsettias or holiday cactus, or are they kind of neutral? So those are other things to find out about your plant. So with artificial light, this is, again, an area that I myself am trying to learn more about. If you can see the light kind of that's coming at me, I'm upstairs in my house, and this is a south window, but I also have this LED white light that I've been using to overwinter some of my outside plants that are, in fact, perennial plants. And it's been doing great. I have some geraniums over there. I have a Meyer lemon tree. I have a petunia, which I didn't know till recently. Really, you can overwinter it. And I'm just going to show, I have this beautiful oxalis. It's a shamrock plant. And I've had this plant for a few years, inside and outside. And this year, putting it under that light, when it's right under there, these leaves just open up. It's beautiful, beautiful, beautiful all day long. It's just really loving all the light. Anyway, plants need what's called PAR, photosynthetically active radiation. And by the way, I do have a reference for a book about light by Leslie Halleck, and it's called Gardening Under Lights. It's very helpful. It gets technical, but there's some good basic information in there. So the PAR that plants need, we see white light, but there's many colors. Just like if you take a prism, you can see that there's many, many colors in the light, and plants need various colors for various functions. But white light, like I showed you here, that's full spectrum. So we perceive it as white, but it's giving these general plants what they need. But it would be less efficient in giving particular needs to plants. So the blue light is where we get the foliage growth. The red light is for flowering and fruiting. I have like a red-blue light downstairs, and when it's on, it looks kind of pinkish-purple. And that one I have with some Gesneriads, they're African violets, and some streptocarpus that I'm trying to grow, and because I want them to flower. And I'm not sure if it's totally the right thing, but I'm kind of trying that. So anyway, there's some things about artificial lighting, and just to mention other things, like many of us have light bulbs that are incandescent, and while it's light, it's really too hot. If you would have a plant right under that, it would burn the foliage. Much better are like the fluorescent, like the shop lights, and many people use those for, growing seeds. But there's a lot of different recommendations for fluorescent tube lighting, depending on what you're trying to grow. The LED type lighting is the newest. It's the most efficient for our energy costs, but it's not necessarily the best for the plant. It would have to be on longer. But as you can tell, it's a complicated topic, but it's something you can challenge yourself to learn more about. Okay, so that's the artificial light. Temperature range needs. Plants are, kind of a lot like us. They like to be a little bit warmer during the day and cooler at night for the most part. Flowering plants really need to get cool at night in order to flower. So plants that really like warmth, their day they like 75 to 85 and night 65 to 75. Most of our tropical foliage plants do well in the same temperature that we do. Most of our homes are maybe 70, a little more during the day, 60 to 70 at night, and that's fine. Other plants like it a little bit cooler, so the flowering plants. So it's just a good rule of thumb for the nighttime temperatures to be 10 to 15 degrees lower during the day. If it's too warm, the plant, it's going to have to burn more energy, and it's not photosynthesizing at night, so it's going to have to burn more energy if it doesn't get cooled off at night. So again, with the windows, and the east facing is going to be cooler, the west facing is going to be higher. Okay. So my point, again, is really do as I say, not as I do. Analyze your living space before shopping for plants. Many of us, myself included, you go to a plant store and you fall in love and you fill up your cart without really considering where you're going to put that plant. I'm better about it now, really trying to think before I go what I'm kind of looking for. But that's really important. Other things about selecting indoor plants, look at the plant thoroughly when you're in the store. I mean, people might buy plants at a big box store or at a more refined nursery. I mean, you can get good plants at a lot of places, but you check the foliage for signs of insects or disease. Some people even bring a little magnifying glass and really look to see. Avoid, yellowing leaves, wilted foliage. But most important, obviously, you're going to transport it carefully, but quarantine it. Some people say several days, some people say 2 weeks. Don't put it with all the rest of your plants because you might be bringing in an insect or a fungal infection or a virus. So keep it separate. Also, even if the plant requires bright light and full sun, you don't want to do that right away with your new house plant. Gradually expose it to the light. If you're bringing plants in from the outside, what I did this year, I try to be much more attentive about it this year. The ones I brought in, I first put them in the garage for a couple of days. First I put them in the garage for a couple of days, figuring that maybe I would lose some of the maybe insects or whatever, and then I cleaned them like with an insecticidal soap and I can't think of the name of the preen oil, and then I took them up onto the picnic table and repotted them. So that's what I did, just to make sure I wasn't bringing a lot of stuff in from outside. So, talking a little bit about like decorating or just selecting your indoor plants. This is where I really liked the author. I mentioned him before. Sorry, I'm just gonna. Dr. D.G. Hessian. This is one of his books, The Indoor Plant Spotter. And he's got several others, but he kind of breaks it down for the non-botanist into like the way plants look and what you might be looking for. So you might want to have more foliage plants. These plants tend to be year-long permanent residents of your home. You might put them outside in the summer, you might not. And these are like your begonias, your peperomias, ferns, calatheas, the ficus. So that is a possible selection. You might want, as I do, I really like to have houseplants that are going to flower, and those are going to be, sometimes a little bit more difficult. You have to get it in the right conditions. The plant that I'm really interested right now in is the Hoya, and that's depicted here, the first plant that you see. And I learned recently from listening to some podcasts that there's people that's all they do is collect Hoyas, and they grow them with all kinds of lighting and different conditions, but you can learn about ones that are simpler to grow and how to get them to flower. I do have a Hoya here. I've had it about a year now, and you'll notice it's in a really small pot because I learned that Hoyas like to be tight, and they like to get kind of dried out. They also like bright light, so I have it under those conditions, and I think it may take quite a few years for it to flower, but we'll see how that goes. Obviously, the gesneriads, the African violets, the streptococcus, they're going to flower for you. I really love African violets now. I think they're really beautiful. I have one here that I'm able to get into flower with my light. It's very uneven. It's not an ideal growth pattern, but I'm learning. And then obviously your orchids, clivia, there's, many flowering houseplants. But you got to be careful. I one time bought a beautiful gardenia, and it was so beautiful. It was flowering, and it had a lot of buds, and I brought it home, and it just dropped all its buds. It was so sad because I didn't know what I was doing, and I put it in too much sun too quickly. So you want to be cautious. Succulents are another, type of plant they're beautiful. They can do very well inside. The kalanchoe down on the bottom, the yellow. They even sell a lot of those miniatures at Trader Joe's, and they're really pretty and will bring a lot of color. The succulents are also fairly easy to propagate. There's also an aloe plant. They do like to stay dry, and they do like the sun. Okay, so repotting, I think we talked a little bit about this before, but we do want to transplant if the soil is really compacted and it's been a while. Also, if it's root bound, if there's a circular pattern and the roots just have nowhere to go. But we don't want to go too big, maybe a couple inches larger, or we may trim the roots if we're going to put it back into the same pot. The plant can look droopy if the roots are too cramped. But some plants, as I mentioned, the Christmas cactus is one, also the Hoya, do like cramped roots. So here's just a few more slides with some plants. Some are from my house. So this is downstairs. I have like a sun room, but it's north. It's like northwest, west and east. So it really does get bright light. But I have, ferns close together. And, I have some of I think this is the pilea here. Anyway, and then the succulents, geranium, citrus in the south window. The foliage plants, again, a Norfolk pine, likes bright indirect light, cool night temperatures. Foliage plants, I like having foliage plants around like that. It's like I showed you with the Eastman sunroom there. Obviously, we need to be concerned about houseplant pests. We can get spider mites, mealybugs, white flies, aphids. You can look, obviously, underneath the leaves carefully. You can use a magnifying glass. When bringing them indoors, we want to spray with clear water. Use insecticidal soap. Supreme is a good product. And, again, quarantine new plants that come into your home. With home decorating, other things to try, terrariums. I attended a really great talk on terrariums given by Master Gardeners, I think, of Ocean County. And I learned a lot, and I've been trying some more terrariums. I have one here that I put in a little glass teapot, and some of the plants are doing well. And it's closed, but it has a little bit of a partial opening. So we'll see how that does. But there's special requirements of how you would, assemble that. Miniature gardens are really fun, little fairy gardens. Here's one I made a year or so ago. I don't know if you can see. But you can get miniature plants. Again, many stores now do sell the miniature plants, and you can decorate it around a theme. This is just an open mini garden. Nothing fantastic about it, but just something that I enjoy having around. I like the little decorative little garden gnome in there. Paying attention to how you group your plants together, how you might use plant stands, how you might use climbing and trailing plants to decorate your home. So this is a plant stand that I have that I use. Now the pothos at the top is really hanging over, so it looks kind of pretty with that hanging. This isn't my house. This is just another example of some creative arranging. Not my house, but some creative windows. I wish I could have African violets that look like that. And I have some references here, some books that I like that are great. And I also want to recommend, obviously, the Master Gardener Helpline, and also podcasts. I've come to really appreciate gardening podcasts, and there are some that are specific to houseplants that I really love. This one, On the Ledge, Jane Perot, and it's out of the UK. Really, really interesting, and she typically has a particular topic or a particular plant she's talking about, and you can go on her website and find all of them archived and look up a topic that you're interested. Bloom and Grow Radio is from New York City. It's a young woman who is kind of, I think, heading up a lot of the millennial interest in houseplants. And I always love the Joe Gardner show. He's a great outside gardener, vegetable gardener, but he has good speakers for inside gardening too and seed starting. Yeah, so that's all that I have, and I hope that it's been helpful.
That was great, Kate. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure. Thank you.
So we have a couple questions. One, you had mentioned pretty much just now a product. I missed it because I was typing, that you spray the plants with when there's disease. It was insecticide soap, and did you say neem?
Yeah, neem, yeah.
Neem
oil. Neem oil. Yeah, I said preen, but it's neem oil. Yes. Thank you. I'm glad that, yeah.
It's okay. Good. Yeah, and you don't want to spray the plants if there isn't a problem, and you want to make sure that you see the actual insect before you spray, because, you could have a plant that has, like Kate was talking about, they could have yellow edges, and that might need overwatering. But you don't want to spray anything until you actually see the insects. So I think that's a good point to make. I am making a Word document for the references, and we'll post it on our website. Okay. So that people can see that.
There's just so many books out there now on houseplants, and I just, put a few in there. Tova Martin, I love her books on houseplants. She has a lot with regards to home decorating, terrariums, and she's written, during the 90s, 2000s. She's wonderful. I mentioned Dr. Hessian, Halleck, The Growing Under Lights. Crockett, he's written The Victory Garden, indoor and outdoor, but he has Crockett's Indoor Garden that I like that book. It's an old book. Probably could only get it at a used bookstore, but
we have a couple questions on Christmas cactus. I think maybe some people have Christmas cactus blooming now. I know mine are budding, so I call it a Thanksgiving cactus.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Apparently there's two types. One does bloom at Thanksgiving and one at Christmas. So the one that I have blooming now is a Thanksgiving one, and this one it just came into bloom. I didn't even usually I put it outside in the summertime, but I had noticed that it got, other ones that I've had got really sunburned. So this year I just kept it in the north area of my house. I just kept it in the same place, and just about 6 weeks ago it just developed beautiful buds, and so when it starts to go into bloom, I increase the water and I take it out of the direct light so that it keeps the blooms for longer.
Yeah, actually that was one of the questions, how to encourage blooming Christmas cactus.
Yeah, they say, I had often thought that it needed to get like a shock, so outside then back to inside, but I think what kicks it in is the shortening of the days.
It's a photoperiod and interruption of darkness that will impact whether or not you have flowering.
Just a reminder, the Master Gardener Helpline is available through email and phone call. Right now, we don't have any Master Gardeners in the Helpline office, but they are able to call in almost every day during the week, and if you leave a message, they will return your call. So make sure that if you have a question about gardening or houseplants, that you do leave a message with the Master Gardener Helpline, and they'll be able to return your call.
Okay, I want to just thank you for sharing your expertise tonight. I invite everybody to join us again coming up in the spring. In March, we're going to have experts all throughout New Jersey. Some of my colleagues at NJAS, as well as people throughout the Northeast region sharing their knowledge. I want to especially thank Angela Monahan, Dave Smella, Rich Weidman, many of my colleagues at Rutgers Cooperative Extension and the New Jersey Agricultural Experiment Station, because we would not be here without the support of all of our professionals. And I especially want to thank our Board of Chosen Freeholders, which will soon be called County Commissioners, for all of their support, because we wouldn't be here in each county throughout the state without their funding. And also mention that the New Jersey Ag Experiment Station is an outreach arm of Rutgers Cooperative Extension, and we're here to provide critical, updated, research-based information to all of our listeners and participants. We're also starting a beginner farmer program this year, so any of you that want to transition from the gardening aspect to starting to produce on your own, that program is going to be starting with a lot of information first online and then hands-on programs starting in March of 2021. And always remember to reach out to your local master gardeners and see if you can join your local master gardener, your county master gardener group. It's a wonderful way to get new information and provide outreach to your community. So a lot of great opportunities there. So reach out to your local cooperative extension office, and we'll see you again coming up in March. Take care, everybody.